Today, we will recap the 2016 sci-fi movie called Passengers, where a man selfishly wakes up his crush from her cryogenic sleep. So let's get started. The story begins on the Starship Avalon, an automated spacecraft on its way to the colony world of Homestead 2 with 5,000 passengers in hypersleep. Unexpectedly, the ship encounters a meteor shower, causing turbulence that leads to a malfunction in Jim Preston's pod, waking him up. The ship's AI informs him that being confused is normal and that for the next 4 months he and his fellow passengers will enjoy lavish food and entertainment on the ship before reaching their destination. She also points out that his wristband gives him access to all the ship's services. Jim reaches his room and the AI informs him about his learning group, numbered 38, which is dedicated to learning engineering. He takes a shower and dresses up for the day, reaching his class only to find no one there. Another AI explains that this voyage was made because Earth is overpopulated and overpriced. When he questions why he is alone, the AI tells him there are 282 staff and 5,000 passengers, so everyone is together in this, making him hysterical and look for others. Panicked, Jim races to the top floor in search of the steward and captain, but the corridors are empty. He enters the observatory, demanding answers for being the sole awake passenger, but receives no response. The observatory's display, however, reveals they are 90 years away from reaching their destination, and it dawns on him that he woke up earlier than required. With the AI guide's assistance, he sends a message to Earth detailing waking up early and being alone and miserable, but the AI tells him the earliest reply will come within 55 years. The next day, Jim discovers a book on hibernation pods and attempts to restart his pod. He becomes trapped inside it without initiating hibernation, so he forcefully escapes and decides to locate the crew's hibernation pods. However, despite his earnest efforts to open the crew pod chamber is inaccessible. Feeling discouraged, he visits the bar where Arthur, an android bartender, advises him to focus on the present rather than on uncontrollable circumstances. Inspired, Jim decides to access the facilities, enjoying the ship's offerings, including food, entertainment, and AI companionship. The novelty eventually fades, leaving Jim bored and increasingly frustrated. One day, while wandering through the passenger hibernation area, Jim stumbles upon a new door containing spacesuits. He holds one like a human in desperate need of a touch of a living person. He puts on the suit and ventures into space through an airlock, the vastness bringing him to tears. He eventually returns to the ship, and his frustration peaks, pushing him dangerously close to ending his life by opening the airlock without protection. He regains his senses in time, rushing back to the hibernation room, where he slips on a discarded bottle, collapsing and weeping on the floor. Collecting himself, he stares at a pod containing a woman named Aurora. Intrigued, he learns more about her through the ship's system, watching a video where she explains her desire for an adventurous life. He watches her interviews, discovering she's a writer planning to start a new life on another planet. Jim eats breakfast near Aurora's pod while watching her interviews and spends the next few days reading her books, and feels miserable as he planned a new life on a new planet. But now he will die on the way with a perfect woman who is out of his reach. He grows increasingly irritated and starts thinking of opening Aurora's hibernation pod. He scolds and tries to distract himself, but the temptation grows as he gazes at the hibernation pod instructions. He struggles with his choices, aware he could ease his loneliness but at another's expense. Unable to resist, he opens Aurora's pod, triggering her awakening. The AI greets Aurora and Jim retreats to his room. After a while, he cautiously re-emerges and greets Aurora. She explains the crew should have awakened before the passengers, but she's the only one. Jim takes her to the observatory, revealing the 89-year journey ahead. He shows her the crew room and the door he couldn't open, confessing he's been awake for 1 year and 3 weeks, trying everything in vain. Aurora's panic prompts her to retreat to her pod, but Jim explains that they lack the necessary equipment to return to hibernation, so he guides her to her quarters, urging her to rest. The next day at breakfast, Aurora brainstorms escape ideas, and Jim shares his fruitless efforts, but she retraces his steps with no success. Frustrated, she starts documenting her experiences in a file titled My Voyage. Aurora decides to interview Jim, inquiring why he left Earth. He recounts his motivation to build his life anew in a place where things could be fixed. Aurora counters that Homestead made thousands of billions with its first planet. It's the biggest business in the world, and the passengers are stupid to pay so much for it. But Jim defends them, saying each has a story she doesn't know about. Aurora reveals she had a return ticket to Earth, intending to be a unique writer with tales of interplanetary travel. Fatigued, she tells Jim to show her what they can do on Avalon, and Jim takes her to dance, sports, movies, and drinking. Several days later, Jim uses a robot to send Aurora a dinner invitation, to which she responds that she would love to, leaving Jim elated. During dinner, they discuss her writing, and she confesses her struggle to find new stories, unlike her father, who always had something to discuss. Jim then surprises her by taking her on a spacewalk in a spacesuit. Hand in hand, they leap into the void, experiencing the breathtaking beauty of space before returning safely to the ship. Their relationship changes as Aurora kisses him. Aurora continues documenting her voyage, reflecting on her growing feelings for Jim. She confides in her writing that they are the last two people together, and it seems fitting that they become a couple. Their accidental happiness mirrors that of castaways, and in this unexpected situation she finds a sense of belonging she's never felt before. As the spacecraft prepares to slingshot around the star Arcturus, it announces for everyone to come to the viewing area, and Jim describes the event as the universe's gift to Aurora. Later, Arthur and Jim sing a birthday song for Aurora, who teases that there are no secrets between her and Jim, a statement Jim affirms before he heads off to retrieve an engagement ring, intending to propose. However, Arthur reveals to Aurora that a year ago, Jim had contemplated whether to wake her up for months, and Aurora is bewildered by this revelation, feeling betrayed. When Jim returns, she confronts him, and he admits waking her up. She retreats to her room, crying hysterically, and begins avoiding Jim until she discovers him asleep one day and releases her frustration by beating him. Despite his attempts to explain, Aurora refuses to listen, so Jim resorts to using the Avalon speakers. He confesses that her voice and work gave his life purpose and meaning. He acknowledges falling in love with her, but Aurora tells him he stole her life. Meanwhile, the Avalon systems reboot, highlighting the unresolved issues accumulating within the ship. Aurora seeks solace in videos from her best friend, who encourages her to let someone into her life and find happiness. To make Aurora feel better, Jim installs a tree on the ship. However, as he takes the elevator, it malfunctions, leaving him trapped. Meanwhile, Aurora's breakfast routine is disrupted by a malfunctioning robot. A loudspeaker announcement introduces Chief Gus Mancuso, questioning the tree's presence on his ship. Rushing to the scene, they encounter Mancuso by the tree. Mancuso leads them to the crew cabin to investigate the ship's problems. A robot falls and breaks, prompting Jim to remark on the numerous malfunctions, including Aurora being locked in her room for 2 days. Mancuso emphasizes that this indicates a significant problem, so he delegates tasks and focuses on monitoring the pods. After his rounds, Mancuso reveals that Jim's pod failure was due to a simple chip issue, whereas multiple systems failed in his pod. Most notably, Aurora's pod was intentionally opened. Aurora reports to Mancuso and tells him about what Jim did to her, referring to waking her from hibernation. Mancuso acknowledges that Jim wrongfully woke her up, but believes there was nothing else Jim could have done, describing his actions as those of a desperate man trying to survive. Mancuso's health deteriorates, and Aurora suggests the rest, but he coughs up blood in his room. That night, Aurora swims while Jim and Mancuso sleep. Suddenly, the Avalon systems shut down, leading to a loss of gravity on board. As gravity vanishes, Aurora becomes trapped underwater, struggling and almost drowning when the system reboots, restoring gravity and allowing her to escape the pool, coughing violently. Mancuso awakens, and he explains that the minor issues have escalated into gravity loss. Reviewing failure charts, they find the initial failure started 2 years ago, the very one that woke Jim. When Aurora inquires about the worst-case scenario, Mancuso reveals they're on a sinking ship, stranded in space. He leads them to the main engineer, but midway his condition worsens, and he passes out. Rushing him to the infirmary, A scan uncovers that he has 612 disorders, with progressive organ failure due to pod-related issues. His life expectancy is mere hours. In visible pain, Mancuso retires to his room as the ship faces difficulty in flight. The two search for him, finding and extracting him from his room. In his final moments, he imparts his ID as a pass, urging them to look after each other and fix the ship before peacefully passing away. The ship continues to experience turbulence, prompting Jim and Aurora to make their way to engineering. As gravity repeatedly fluctuates and Arthur becomes erratic, Jim deactivates him to avoid harm. In engineering, they find a door that resists Mancuso's ID. After forcefully entering, they discover a pressure lockdown room. Upon entering, extreme pressure pulls them back, but once inside, the door seals and oxygen levels stabilize. They uncover meteor-induced holes in the ship, causing damage to the reactor control computer. Jim retrieves replacement parts, warning Aurora that the computer will shut down when he removes the module, but quickly replaces it. However, the replacement is rejected, and the outer door jams dangerously, causing the reactor to overheat. Jim decides to go outside to unjam the door, handing Aurora Mancuso's ID in case of emergency. Just before he leaves, Aurora insists he returns to her. Jim manages to open the jammed door outside, but it won't stay open. He must remain to hold it while Aurora, on the other side, fights the searing heat to hold a hot metal gear. She pleads for Jim to return, but he realizes he must stay to prevent the ship's destruction. As time passes, he instructs her to pull the vent reactor, which she resists out of fear for his life. Jim emphasizes the lives of the 5,000 people on the ship, prompting her to pull the lever finally. The ensuing fire engulfs Jim, causing him to collapse with intense pressure, severing the rope that connected his spacesuit to the ship. Using his spacesuit signals, Jim connects with Aurora, informing her that the tether snapped and he can't return to the ship. He expresses his regret that they couldn't meet 90 years later, when he would have built a house and read her books to her. Aurora rushes to wear her spacesuit and goes into space to rescue him. She successfully retrieves him, and as he dangles unconscious, she pulls him to safety. Jim loses consciousness and she places him in the infirmary, allowing the robots to attend to his medical needs. She's overjoyed when he eventually wakes up. Weeks pass and Jim shares with Aurora that the autodock in the infirmary can be used for hibernation. With Mancuso's ID, they could put her to sleep, allowing her to wake up when they reach their destination. She'd have a year to live on the new planet and return to Earth to write her desired book. However, Aurora decides to stay with Jim, declining the opportunity for hibernation. They embrace the life they've built together on the Avalon, and eventually, they get engaged, finding happiness in their shared journey. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notification to watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.